Right. This one's called Superstition. Uh, It's Amy, I think at 18 at Putney. And this was about adventures at her house. I worked for her for like 9 years. So yeah, here we go. Kneeling in your living room by the record player, you telling the story of a woman forced to watch a murder, you right on the edge, later saying it was when you had a break. There was nothing in the telling to suggest that it was an imagined event. This was all from much later when she lived in LA most of the time, but had been sent back to Berkeley. The front door, which made a commanding sound when opened, revealed your mother come to find you, me tasked with making her uh, believe that you're still in Berkeley. You're in LA, wearing a wig with straight hair, like Barbara Streisand when you went out. And it worked as a disguise. It's probably not true, but in my memory, Gloria's birthday party table, quite long, made from 3 doors, was spread out from the front door to the other end of the dining room. The cloth children's playhouse, hoisted up to the ceiling now, was a big hit at the party, the 3-year-olds running into it for an hour in a game that looked like slamming into mom's leg and trying to duck under the slamming into mom's leg and trying to duck under game. It was to be the object of a showdown conversation with you as to why was it there. It doesn't look the way the house should look to fool my mother. Things were unraveling after 9 years of everything from teaching her how to drive again to meeting her mom at the airport, cleaning the house, painting the trim with organic paint and organic putty that Grackles thought was like linseed halva, which it kind of was. Neither of us could guess what was making the pounding noise. It was clear the next day when I went to continue painting and saw the obvious peck marks in the delicious putty. On the refrigerator here is a photo for a long time before noticing it was a photo of the weeping birch by the front door, likely the last surviving one of several that trooped down the front paths to the street, including one that I cut down with a little rented chainsaw. My girlfriend in the street to ward off traffic when it fell. The guy stopped to ask her for directions, ignoring my yelling. Everything was okay that time, and the time when I had to race across town late at night because you and your boyfriend could not shut the water off, and the main had broken and was filling the unfinished part of the basement that had a dirt floor where someone had tossed a couch. I don't know why they couldn't turn the water off. It could very well be the thing of deciding it should go a certain way and just I've done that with locks. I wouldn't put another lock on and go, oh yeah. Anyway, this same setting reappeared later in Carlos's call to Amy after her father died. This was Carlos getting his hooks into Amy, that being Carlos Castaneda. In Sorcerer's Apprentice, Amy provided a detailed picture of her own seduction Because of her father's friendship with Castaneda, her case was unusual. Over the years, he'd stopped by the Wallace home. When Irving died in 1990, soon after, Castaneda called and told her that her father had appeared to him in a dream and said her father, was trapped in vines under the house and needed Amy and Carlos to free him. Amy, suitably skeptical, came down to LA and the seduction began in earnest. She recounts how she soon found herself in bed with Castaneda. He told her he hadn't had sex for 20 years. When Amy later worried she might have gotten pregnant, they had to use birth control. Castaneda leapt from the bed, shouting, "Me make you pregnant? Impossible. The narwhal's sperm isn't human. Don't let any of the narwhal's sperm out, Nina. It will burn away your humanness." He didn't mention the vasectomy he'd had years before. The courtship continued for several weeks. Castaneda told her they were energetically married. One afternoon, he took her to a sorcerer's compound. As they were leaving, Wallace looked at the street sign so she could remember the location. Castaneda furiously berated her. A warrior wouldn't have looked. He ordered her return to Berkeley. She did. When she called, he refused to speak to her. The witches, however, did, instructing her on the sorceric steps necessary to return. She had to let go of her attachments. Wallace got rid of her cats. This didn't cut it. Castaneda, she wrote, got on the phone and called her an egotistical, spoiled Jew. He ordered her to get a job at McDonald's. Instead, she waitressed at a bed and breakfast. 6 months later, she was allowed back. Amy told me once that her brother said that Carlos was running a cult. I was still in the framework of the only way out was in, and followed her momentum past that comment of being a cult. She was trying to process Carlos sending her away. That was the subject. My idea of providing support was to say that that was a common test with spiritual teachers and it would all work out. Can't remember exactly how long the separation was. Might have been 6 months. It was the witches who she was in touch with. Carlos had her taking a job waiting tables, recapitulating in a closet, which involved going over and over attachment stuff from the past. With others in the group, lots of talk about separating from their family. That's when she got rid of her cats, doing Carlos style feng shui in her writing room, putting uh, lights up in the four corners of the room, installing at great expense a beautiful 50s short white wool shag carpet. When Carlos directed her to get rid of her cats, she asked me for help, and I arranged for them to go to people I knew in the country. That didn't go well. They were exclusively indoor city cats, and let outside didn't last long. I felt terrible. Amy much worse, of course. I felt I'd let her down. She was fixated on doing whatever it took to get back with him, thinking some magical thing would happen any minute. It filled her head. "You are the one we have been looking for years. You are the Blue Scout. Now we can begin the final stage of the work." From The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's a quote. Florinda then introduced Carol to the group. This is like down the street from her house. They showed up doing a talk after hiding away for decades. Carol introduced to, Florinda then introduced Carol to the group as the Nawal woman, who had disappeared into infinity, also referred to as the second attention, for 10 years, body and all. It felt to her like a second, Florinda told us. She lost all sense of time. Quote, when Carol miraculously reappeared, jogging in her sweatsuit, Florinda continued incongruously, she opened the magical door that allowed me to be here tonight, the door that has allowed Carlos to begin giving public appearances. End of quote. Woman returns from infinity, still jogging, sweatsuit intact. If absurdity could kill, I would be dead today. Mm-hmm. Turns out absurdity can kill. And Castaneda's early books drew on Buddhism and phenomenology. His later work seemed more indebted to science fiction. But throughout, there was a preoccupation with meeting death like a warrior. In the 90s, Castaneda told his followers that, like Don Juan, he wouldn't die. He'd burn from within, turn into a ball of light, and ascend to the heavens. In the summer of 1997, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. Because sorcerers weren't supposed to get sick, his illness remained a tightly guarded secret. While the witches desperately pursued traditional and alternative treatments, the workshops continued as if nothing was wrong, although Castaneda often wasn't there. Castaneda continued to decline. He became increasingly frail, his eyes yellow and jaundiced. He rarely left the compound, according to Wallace. Tiggs told her the witches had purchased guns, while the Nawal lay bedridden with a morphine drip, watching war videos. The inner circle burned his papers. The grieving Abelard had begun to drink. I'm not in any danger of becoming an alcoholic now, she told Wallace, because I'm leaving. So it's too late, Wallace writes. She was telling me in her way that she planned to die. Wallace also recalled a conversation with Lindahl, the star of the Tensegrity videos, and the woman, and one of the women who disappeared. If I don't go with him, I'll do what I have to. Wallace said when Lindahl told her, it's too late for you and me to remain in the world. I think you know exactly what I mean. Lindahl was found like several years after her car out in the desert, and then her skeleton, or part, most of it, nearby. And then in passing years, the DNA got better to where they could identify her. I don't think any of their family filed a missing person, and there was no follow up. All these people just vanished. They had a whole bunch of money coming to them, and then just like people just kind of like, well, okay, who knows what happened. Amy died in 2013 of heart problems. She was a different person by then. The happy, bouncy Amy was gone, and the tough but battered Amy remained. Remembering now her talking about the woman forced to watch a murder that I mentioned at the beginning. Quote, I've had kind of a break. I became accident prone. I fell down some stairs. I started losing things. People kept saying, I'm worried about you. I'm worried about you. I don't understand. Wasn't it a catharsis? I said, yeah, it's a catharsis, but it's not over. People's bodies are found, and there are people who want to. It's a little confusing. People's bodies are found, and there are people who want to kill me. That's her saying that. And it's really tough. It was a lot of years, you know. I mean, it's so great to hear you understand that. I'm so tired of explaining to people why I'm not all better now. I found another interview with Amy slightly spooky in that she ends with, quote, my last words, reader, please don't ever do what I did. Many people wrote to me and said that my book had prevented them from committing suicide to be with him. Before the book was out, at least one woman made the papers by jumping off an orange crate to her death into a deep gorge below to join Carlos on the other side. This was the first thing that made me feel better since she died. I'd been stuck and guilty for encouraging her to go back when she would get kicked out, to say nothing of arranging for her cats to go to a friend's in the country where they were killed right away. It wasn't lost to me that if all of this had been a few years later, a quick poke around the internet might have changed things. Now, through some grieving illogic, I can try to wriggle out by saying, well, the book saved lives. A return to earlier times. Remembering now, standing by the stairwell when Holly asked me if I would be a sperm donor. Amy was standing there. I was glad to have a witness, as the subject may be tense. I tried to make a joke saying, if we could do it the natural way, a joke that crumbled halfway out of my mouth. Holly and I worked together, taking care of the house, and had a great look but don't touch chemistry. We became friends at a meeting at the organization that was helping adoptees find their birth mothers. She found almost right away, and I continued for 5 years. Still, I couldn't say yes. I knew I was going to have a third child. At least that is what I'd come to believe, having heard bidden and unbidden in psychic readings for years, for 20 years, it seemed. It was likely less, but those were jam packed years, still in the tumble cycle. And because I had lost my first child to boarding school and summer camp and my insanity, and the second one more amicably, but again to emotional crisis that had us chasing one another back and forth from Florida to New York and back, getting together for strength, coping when we found out he was deaf, and finally settling in California separately but near one another. Because of all that, the idea of intentionally having a child who would live in a separate family gave me the shivers. The third child. Just off the dining room was a concrete porch with a wisteria vine, an old one, like the one from my childhood. On a decisive day when I was making the conscious choice to get together with the best friend of my childhood's friend who had set us up, I was living out of a Pinto station wagon and sleeping in Amy's garage, along with a lot of abandoned suitcases and odds and ends, possibly things friends had left and never come for. Across the street, a chainsaw was at full throttle. I was frantically changing out of my work clothes to go see my intended, knowing if I did this, a third child would show up. And she did. I had a superstition that you shouldn't do anything momentous during an eclipse. So the sight of hundreds of crescents of light on the porch from the light of an eclipse of the sun filtering through the wisteria vine rattled me and gave me a foretaste of what's to come. It felt inevitable, no turning back, but did not put off a bed of roses vibe. Um, uh, huh. That's a tile I made 4 years before Gloria was born, the Peace Wall in Berkeley. My childhood friend Sarah, who set us up, worked on the Peace Wall project, bending rebar for a wall that curved around a fountain with room for 2,000 tiles. For $5, you could make a tile. The image I arrived at foreshadowed Gloria's birth by 4 years. It has an uncanny resemblance to Gloria and her mother. Her mother was Sarah's best friend, and I only met her once at that time and hadn't even spoken to her. I don't remember how long after Gloria was born that I made the connection. Then, when it blew up, the house became a refuge. When I saw Gloria's mother reach for a knife, even though it was an unconscious, nervous gesture, and importantly, because it was an unconscious, nervous gesture, I'd come within an inch of getting stabbed in the back in a similar heated confrontation with the air crackling. I ran out of the house barefoot and asked if I could stay at Amy's. You want to be invisible? Go out in public without any shoes at night and crouch down on the sidewalk figuring out what your next move was. You do not exist in the public's mind. It's like, oh Lord. My father had died, and I quickly calculated that I could not deal with that and cope with the wild unreality of postpartum depression, spinning way out into dangerous territory, the manic end of bipolar. What convinced me that I was on the right track after 2.5 years under the idea that it could not be my fate to get separated for the third time when the child was at the same age was that once at Amy's house, it was like a scene change in the play. I was immediately at peace, felt like my old self. I'd got bent out of shape dealing. I've been there and been with other people who got out there. The one that came flying through the tiny kitchen with a carving knife, for instance. I caught her arm and still see the prongs of the knife directly in front of my right eye. Oh, I see. Okay. Um, Commercial break here. There's a picture of. Uh, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. Mm. There's Gloria on the front steps at Amy's house, and this was actually the genesis of a photo project, which happened years and years later. But it was the same deal, little costumes that I made and headpieces, and well, like in the picture behind me. Uh, but see, yeah, that was how many years? I don't know. Anyway, it was busy times. It seems like a bunch of years. And then painted backdrops. Uh, there's a photograph of Gloria where the steps from the front door and the steps from the porch make a nice little theater set on the landing. I made some scenery of a circus and a paper headdress for Gloria to pose in front of it. It was there on the third floor, which was like an open dance studio with French windows onto the balcony and a view of the bay. We, Gloria and I, made a pig out of waterbed plastic to be lifted by 10 3-foot balloons at a big gathering on the hog farm land where they had a yearly concert to benefit it, the mortgage on the land. This was a crew that ran dead shows and came up with things like the 96-foot dragon for Grateful Dead Chinese New Year. It was like the hog farm started doing babysitting backstage, so that was they weren't running the whole show. Anyway, floating things, as in lighter than air balloons, are finicky, a much milder version of what goes on if you try to hold a floating thing underwater. It was windy. The year before, the one I made got blown down into the audience by the wind. I had no idea what I was doing. This year, with 10 balloons, it was no problem. When we stepped back to admire the ferocious hog with swiveling eyes and wagging tongue, that is, when Wavy Gravy, oblivious, walked through the tie line, holding it down, he never noticed the balloon it got caught in his boot. He broke the string and walked off. The balloon took off like a rocket. Get it, Dad, get it. I can't. It wants to go up. I wasn't sure how upset she was going to be, and added, when it gets really high, the balloon will break and it will come down again. That seemed to work. Amazing, calm, and steady child help. We went on to other things, me unrealistically hoping she might let it pass. An hour later, I was carrying her on my hip back where we had put the thing together, and she starts jumping up and down and pointing on the ground. There lay the nozzle to one of the balloons, tied in a knot. I kept it in my car as a reminder of what I wasn't sure the power of belief. I had said it would come back. The last time I saw it, it was at 5,000 feet, a tiny dot, and heading north and rising. How it had caught another stream of air, rode it back south, and have the balloon burst and the nozzle land exactly in the spot where it was earlier was beyond me. Really, I feel like your brain is on a turntable in your head. It's just like, maybe if I blink, it'll come to me. I put it to, in case you think you are doing this alone. I need some of that now as once again a long term relationship unravels. The worst part is toward the end, but not the finishing end, the beginning, the cracks showing, the ripping sound somewhere. All seem to have a life of its own, past where a certain momentum is built up. Before the absolute end, Amy only wanted to communicate by email. What I didn't know was that the email server we were using put, without any logic I could find, some messages in a separate file with an obscure, innocuous name. It was like a game of Chinese whisper with two gaps in it. She would write saying she wanted me to pay $1,500 she had to pay my friend's son, who was renting her living room, so he could move out on short notice, also known as in the middle of his MA orals. I tried to smooth the way and got caught in the middle. The details hardly matter because they got lost on the way to the same mystery file on her end. So it looked as if we'd both gone round the bend to each other. That is when it feels as if the fates had stepped in to deliver the coup de grace. I don't want to end on that grim note. Here's a high note before the trouble began. The fountain. Very proud of this fountain, I will admit it. There was a window on the basement level that had been taken out, and there was plywood there. And her husband, long gone, had converted it to a sound studio, recorded a bunch of music. And so it was, I came up with this whole thing. I don't know. Amy had the ability to ask for stuff that I'd never done exactly before. I mean, I'd done messing with this. I'd done it. I mean, she said, "Oh, my dishwasher's broken. Can you fix it?" I said, "Oh, sure. I never owned a dishwasher. I had no idea. And to this day, I have no idea how on earth I figured out what part needed to be replaced. It was like, I don't know, it was weird. I went to the parts store, put it in, and it was fixed. And now it's like it happened in a dream. Anyway, can you make a fountain?" So I made this alcove. I mean, I really love the house. I didn't even know you could love a house. I just wanted to fit in, and so I'm just, it was like inventing techniques. It was this uh, craftsman Swiss chalet thing that had been stuccoed over when there was a great fire in 1923. It was designed by Maybach's brother-in-law, so they were kind of in the same group, and and so they stuccoed over the shingles. So stucco, okay, and then made this whole thing, and got a 600 pound of slate. The fountain goes down to a white concrete basin, and that sits on this huge piece of slate. My main memory of building was having Gloria on my back and slivers of black slate flying by. I calculated that my fist on the chisel blocked any that would hit us. Still felt like a bad dad. The raccoons thought I had made them a water park and promptly extracted the autofill mechanism and tossed it toward the neighbor's yard downhill, where, during the night, it autofilled their entire backyard to the depths of a good inch. The woman from Israel was raving when she discovered it. You're going to wash my house down the hill. Uh, oh well, I might as well just keep going. So then she decides she's going to sell the house, and I assumed, it's like so often that takes a while. And the neighbor happened to drop by. I don't know, fortuitously for them anyway, and less so for me. And I told him, it's like, how did I know they had $750,000 cash to come over and buy the house in 11 days flat? Whereupon we and all the tenants, because that was the deal, we turned it into a boarding house for the Acupressure Institute, and people came and went doing 6-week uh, courses in acupressure. That was fun, and it was a primer for my life now, where I have a art complex and have people come in and out, cause trouble. Yeah, I saw a poster on Holy Hill, so it's like somebody going to divinity school, and did anybody, I'm looking for a room. There was this woman, and I don't know, she was an insane alcoholic who would go into blackout and sling soup around the kitchen and then not even know what she was apologizing for the next day. That's when I found out that if you have a big house, go ahead and put 2 staircases in. That way, if there's any, having a problem with the person on the second or third floor and you hear them coming down, you can go back up the other back staircase. And I never saw that woman again for 9 months. That caused holy hell with Amy, because then she had to deal with it because I couldn't do anything with her. You know. Anyway, be that as it may, Amy put us up in the Berkeley City Club for like a week, and I went and got a room so small I had to pull back the mattress to be able to open the door to get out of the room. It was a room. It was near Gloria's house. So Gloria, age 5, when we lived at the Berkeley's Women's Club, was at Julia Morgan Venetian Palazzo, right near campus. And when we stayed there, a theater group was using the library to perform the Aspirin Papers, a period play set in Venice in the late 19th century and based on the Henry James novella of the same name. The Aspirin Papers is a story of obsession, grandeur lost, and dreams of Byronesque adventures. Ambitious editor Morton Vint is fascinated by the romantic poet Jeffrey Aspern and by his icon's short and wildly romantic life. The front hall was effectively the backstage, so it was like time travel when we'd come in at night. There were wonderful concert grand pianos, including a 9-foot Bosendorfer scattered here and there. That didn't hurt at all. Speaking of falling in love with a house, the back of the house overlooked the Cal swimming pool. Steam rose from the pool. What was remarkable was that one swimmer was more beautiful than the next, and the next even more so. Here come two more. Incredible. I was like, what? Do we have auditions for the women's swimming team? After a few days of this, I went over to have a better look. What I found was a perfectly normal group of cow swim jocks. Apparently, with the steam and the fact that I was just far enough away, I was having aided hallucinations of beauties from Waterhouse to Botticelli and beyond. Forget rose colored glasses. What you need are slightly blurry glasses. And that's most of it. Oh my God. It was a full on demonstration of how, Castaneda, oh my God. No magic. Couldn't even talk about his books. I was like, oh no. And it was crazy bullshit going on. Toward the end, he was talking about a legless 200-pound pigeon that never, it could never land. I don't know. Con men just, they can't believe what they're getting away with. I mean, UCLA still says, oh yeah, we gave him a degree. And his publisher, it's like, oh yeah, it's nonfiction. He's an anthropologist, postgrad, who didn't, I mean, he never learned a Yaqui name of any of that shit. And he talks about strolling in the desert where anybody would mention that they were getting eaten alive by insects and it was 110 and they were afraid they were going to die if they didn't get out of there. You know, and the Yaquis don't take peyote and on and on. Now, it wasn't even close, but who knew about any of that stuff? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I loved her. She was just fantastic, and it was it was quite something. But that's life. Everything gets taken from you, starting with the really important things. All righty, folks. That's it.